98%. That's the purity level Spanish metallurgists recorded when they first tested gold from the Philippine archipelago in the 16th century. Back in Europe, Roman-era refineries had struggled for generations to push past 85% using their best techniques. The Filipinos were already there. They had been there for centuries before any Spanish ship crossed the Pacific. This isn't a story about treasure maps or buried hoards. It's a story about knowledge so advanced it made colonial administrators nervous enough to lock documents away for 300 years. The gold was always there. Visitors from China, Arab traders, and merchants from the Malay world all noted it in their accounts. They noted something else too. The people of the archipelago didn't find gold. They processed it with a precision that defied easy explanation. Pre-colonial Filipinos wore gold jewelry, traded gold ornaments, and adorned their dead with gold accessories at a scale and quality that archaeologists still puzzle over today. The Laguna copperplate inscription, dated 900 CE and discovered in 1989, references debts being paid in gold of specified purity grades. In 900 CE. The people writing that document understood metallurgical gradation well enough to make it a legal standard. Stop for a moment. A legal standard for gold purity in 900 CE means institutions. It means a knowledge system old enough to be codified into law. Think about it. The pre-colonial Filipino goldsmith didn't work alone in a hut. Communities in Butuan, in the Visayas, and across Mindanao organized gold production the way modern facilities organize precision manufacturing. Archaeological digs at Butuan uncovered gold artifacts with filigree work so fine that the wire used measured under a millimeter in diameter. To produce wire that thin from raw ore requires understanding how metal responds to heat at incremental temperature changes. You can't guess your way to sub-millimeter gold wire. You build knowledge over generations, test it, refine it, and pass it down through a structured apprenticeship. Important. The Spanish noticed immediately that Filipino gold differed from what they'd seen elsewhere. Pedro de San Buenaventura, a Franciscan friar who compiled a Tagalog vocabulary in 1593, included specific local terms for different grades of processed gold. Those terms pointed to a classification system with multiple distinct categories. A language doesn't develop precise vocabulary for something people don't already understand in precise terms. The vocabulary existed because the knowledge existed first. Gold refinement at high purity levels requires removing copper, silver, and other trace elements from raw ore. The classical European method used cementation, essentially packing gold in a mixture of brick dust, salt, and sulfur compounds, then heating it over extended periods. Roman goldsmiths used this method and achieved results that varied considerably depending on the quality of their materials and the consistency of their fire. Their upper limit, in practice, hovered well below 90% for mass production. Individual pieces could be pushed higher, but the process was slow, unpredictable, and expensive in fuel. Filipino refiners appear to have used a different approach entirely. Researchers studying artifacts from the Gold of Ancestors collection at the Ayala Museum have noted that the alloy compositions of pre-colonial Philippine gold don't match what you'd expect from simple cementation refining. The gold appears to have been processed through a multi-stage purification method. The specific chemistry embedded in the artifacts suggests the use of organic acids derived from local plant materials as part of the refining sequence. The Philippine archipelago is extraordinarily biodiverse. Certain plants native to the islands produce acids capable of selectively dissolving impurities from gold without attacking the gold itself. A refiner who knew which plants to use and how to prepare them possessed a biochemical tool that European metallurgists did not have access to. That knowledge lived in communities. It moved through families, through trade guilds, through the networks of skilled workers that pre-colonial Philippine society built around specialized crafts. The Spanish term for these practitioners was platero, but the Filipino goldsmiths they encountered operated from a framework far older and more sophisticated than European guild traditions. The Visayan word panday referred to a skilled smith, and panday held social status in their communities that reflected how valuable their knowledge was considered. They were not laborers. They occupied a position closer to what we would call technical specialists, people whose expertise commanded respect and resources. Something changed when the Spanish colonial administration tightened its grip on the archipelago. The goldsmithing knowledge did not vanish overnight. Skills embedded in communities over centuries do not disappear in a generation, but the documentation of those skills began to be controlled. Spanish administrators quickly understood that Philippine gold processing expertise represented an economic asset that needed to be managed. Reports sent back to Madrid describing local refining methods were classified at levels that kept them out of general circulation. Researchers who have examined documents in the Archivo General de Indias in Seville have found references to technical reports on Philippine metallurgy that were restricted for generations. The classification was not about protecting Filipinos. It was about protecting a monopoly. Here is the weight of that. The most detailed written records of pre-colonial Filipino gold refining technique were created by the people who stood to profit from suppressing them. For 300 years, those documents sat in administrative archives while the popular European understanding of pre-colonial Philippine civilization settled into the comfortable story of simple tribal societies waiting to be uplifted by colonial contact. The gold artifacts themselves argued against that story constantly. Museum curators, archaeologists, and materials scientists kept finding evidence that contradicted the narrative. A pair of golden kinari artifacts from Mindanao, now held in the National Museum of the Philippines, displays granulation work, tiny spheres of gold fused to a surface, at a density and precision that required controlled high-temperature application techniques. The craftsperson who made those pieces understood thermal expansion coefficients, not as an abstract concept, but as practical knowledge encoded in the motion of skilled hands. The oral traditions carried the rest. Across the Visayas and Mindanao, communities maintained stories about the old ways of working gold. These were not fairy tales about magical metal. They were technical memory dressed in narrative form, the way knowledge survives when writing gets restricted or destroyed. Researchers working with indigenous communities in the Caraga region of Mindanao have documented descriptions of multi-stage gold processing that align with what the artifact chemistry suggests. The descriptions reference plant-based preparation stages, specific fire management techniques, and a cooling sequence that controlled the final crystal structure of the refined metal. Incidentally, the crystal structure of refined gold affects its color, its workability, and its resistance to surface tarnish. Pre-colonial Filipino gold jewelry recovered from burial sites shows surface characteristics consistent with controlled crystallization during the final cooling stage. This is not accidental. You do not get controlled crystallization by accident in an open-air workshop environment. You get it by understanding what you are doing well enough to repeat it deliberately. Truly detailed knowledge of these methods was gradually obscured, but the surviving evidence still points to a highly advanced tradition of craftsmanship. Deliberately. Think about it. The Spanish documented one practice that confused them for decades. Filipino refiners sometimes added specific organic materials during the final stage of processing. Spanish observers recorded it as ritual behavior, as superstition layered onto craft. Modern materials science suggests a completely different reading. Certain organic compounds, when introduced to molten gold during cooling, can act as grain refiners, altering the microstructure of the metal in ways that improve its mechanical properties. The ritual, the Spanish dismissed, may have been a technically sophisticated metallurgical step that European refiners of the same period did not use and would not understand for another 2 centuries. Now pay attention. The pattern repeats across every area of pre-colonial Philippine material culture that researchers examine with modern tools. The closer you look, the more sophisticated the picture becomes. The story that gets told about this civilization depends enormously on who controls the sources. For 300 years, the people who controlled the sources had reasons to minimize what those sources revealed. There are documents in Seville that researchers have not fully cataloged. There are artifact collections in Manila with analysis still pending. There are communities in Mindanao, Palawan, and the Visayas carrying fragments of technical knowledge in oral form that no academic institution has systematically documented. The gold is still telling its story. The metallurgical evidence sits in museums, waiting for the right analysis. And somewhere in the administrative archives of the colonial period, there may be technical reports describing how Filipino refiners achieved results that others could not. Such reports, if they exist, could include names, methods, and observations that were overlooked or restricted by colonial administrators. Important. The question worth sitting with is this: who decided the world still is not ready, and what exactly are they protecting?